Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin. Picture, if you will, a woman named Daisy Lewis, sitting in a sterile lawyer's office on what should have been just another Tuesday morning. The autumn sun filtered through Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across legal documents that spelled the end of 8 years of marriage. Her fingers trembled not from the October chills seeping through the windows, but from the weight of the pen in her hand as she signed her name for the final time as Thomas Lewis's wife. "This concludes your divorce proceedings, Mrs. Lewis," the attorney said, his voice clinical and detached, as if he were discussing the weather rather than the dissolution of a life shared. "You're free to go." Free. Such a small word, yet it echoed in Daisy's chest like a church bell at midnight, both liberating and haunting. She gathered her things slowly, her fingers instinctively reaching for the rose quartz crystal she always carried in her purse, her touchstone, her source of comfort for the past decade. But as she grasped it, the stone slipped from her trembling fingers and shattered against the marble floor, its pink fragments scattering like broken promises. The lawyer's secretary looked up, startled by the sound, but Daisy barely noticed. She stared at the pieces of her most beloved crystal, the one that had guided her through her grandmother's death, through the struggles of building her healing practice, through countless moments when the world felt too heavy to bear. Now it lay in pieces, just like her marriage, just like the life she had carefully constructed. "I'm so sorry," the secretary said, hurrying around the desk with a dustpan. "Let me clean that up for you." "No," Daisy whispered, her voice barely audible. She knelt and gathered the fragments in her palm, feeling their sharp edges bite into her skin. It's meant to be this way. Sometimes things have to break before they can become something new. That evening, Daisy sat in her empty apartment. Thomas had taken most of the furniture in their settlement, staring at the rose quartz pieces spread across her kitchen table. Her reflection in the window showed a woman of 32 who looked older, worn down by years of defending her beliefs to a husband who saw her crystal healing practice as nothing more than hippie nonsense. "You're living in a fantasy, Daisy," he had said during one of their final arguments. "Crystals don't heal people. You're taking advantage of desperate, vulnerable people." Those words had cut deeper than any sharp-edged stone ever could, because somewhere in her heart, a small voice wondered if he might be right, Dad, without really thinking. She packed a bag, loaded her aging Honda Civic with her remaining crystals, and began driving. Where? She didn't know. The road would tell her, she decided, the same way the stones whispered their ancient secrets to those who knew how to listen. The highway stretched endlessly before her, painted silver by the full moon overhead. Mile after mile she drove through small towns and past sleeping farmlands, the radio playing soft melodies that seemed to heal something broken inside her chest. She was searching not for a destination, but for herself. 3 hours into her journey, fatigue finally overtook determination. Daisy pulled into a rest stop just outside a town called Millfield, where the only signs of life were a few long-haul truckers catching sleep in their cabs and a lone figure sitting at a picnic table, hunched over what appeared to be research papers under the harsh fluorescent lights. Daisy parked and stepped out, breathing in the crisp night air. She needed to cleanse her energy, to center herself after the emotional trauma of the day. She pulled out a small pouch of crystals, amethyst for clarity, black tourmaline for protection, clear quartz for amplification, and began arranging them in a sacred circle on the ground beside her car. She closed her eyes and began to hum softly, a melody her grandmother had taught her, allowing the vibrations to flow through her body and into the earth. The tension in her shoulders began to release, and for the first time all day, she felt a glimmer of peace. Interesting technique. Daisy's eyes snapped open. Standing a few feet away was the woman from the picnic table, tall, with short auburn hair and intelligent hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a burgundy sweater and jeans, and her expression was one of curious skepticism rather than mockery. "I'm sorry," Daisy said, her cheeks burning with embarrassment as she quickly gathered her crystals. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You didn't disturb me," the woman said, stepping closer. "I'm actually conducting research on alternative healing methods and their psychological effects. I'm Dr. Melanie Powell, and I have to admit, I'm fascinated by what you're doing." Daisy looked up from her crystals, surprised by the woman's directness. Most people either dismissed her practices outright or patronized her with fake interest.
This felt different, genuine scientific curiosity mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify. Daisy Lewis, she replied, standing and extending her hand. And what I'm doing? Well, most people think it's complete nonsense. Melanie's handshake was firm, warm. Most people think a lot of things are nonsense until science finds a way to explain them. The placebo effect is incredibly powerful. If people believe something will help them, it often does, regardless of the mechanism. So you think it's all in people's heads? Daisy asked, trying to keep the defensiveness out of her voice. I think the human mind is far more complex and powerful than we give it credit for, Melanie said carefully. And I think dismissing something entirely without studying it is poor scientific practice. There was something in the way she said it, respectful rather than condescending, that made Daisy's heart skip. When was the last time someone had taken her seriously, had actually wanted to understand rather than judge? Would you like some coffee? Melanie asked, gesturing toward the vending machine. I have a feeling this could be a long conversation. Asterisk, they sat at the picnic table until dawn, two women from completely different worlds finding common ground in their shared humanity. Melanie told Daisy about her research at the university, how she'd grown up in a family of scientists who valued logic above all else, and how she sometimes wondered if they were missing something essential by focusing only on what could be measured and quantified. Daisy shared her story, her grandmother's teachings, her journey into crystal healing, the way she'd felt called to help others find peace and balance in their lives. She told Melanie about Thomas, about the constant battles over her work, about the crushing loneliness of having the person you love most dismiss the thing that gave your life meaning. I don't know if what I do actually works, Daisy admitted, as the first light of sunrise painted the sky pink and gold. I just know that when I place my hands on certain stones, when I set intentions and create sacred space, something shifts. People feel better. They find hope. Maybe that's enough. Melanie leaned forward, her eyes intense. Can I tell you something? Yesterday, I had the worst migraine of my life. I've tried every medical intervention available, and nothing helps. But watching you work with those stones, seeing the peace that came over your face, my headache completely disappeared. Daisy stared at her, speechless. I can't explain it, Melanie continued, and as a scientist, that should terrify me. But instead, I'm intrigued. Would you be willing to let me study your methods? Not to debunk them, but to understand them? You want to study me? Daisy asked, her heart racing. I want to learn from you, Melanie corrected. There's a difference. As autumn turned to winter, their professional collaboration deepened into something more personal. They spent long evenings talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their childhoods, their fears, their dreams. Melanie would help Daisy organize her crystal inventory, and Daisy would listen patiently as Melanie worked through complex research problems out loud. It was during one of these quiet winter evenings that Melanie first asked to experience a healing session herself. I've been observing for months, she said, settling onto the massage table in Daisy's healing room. I think it's time I understood what my research subjects are actually experiencing. Daisy's hands trembled slightly as she selected the stones, moonstone for intuition, rose quartz for heart healing, clear quartz for amplification. Having Melanie as a client felt different, more intimate somehow, than working with strangers. Just breathe, Daisy whispered, placing the first stone gently on Melanie's chest. Let yourself feel whatever comes up. As Daisy's hands moved over the stones, channeling intention and healing energy, something shifted between them. The air in the room seemed to shimmer with possibility, and when Melanie opened her eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. I felt ... She began, then stopped. I don't have words for what I felt, but I understand now why people keep coming back to you. There's something here that can't be measured or quantified, but it's real. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, both women recognized the truth they'd been dancing around for months. This wasn't just about crystals and research anymore. This was about connection, about love growing in the most unexpected soil. Asterisk, the kiss happened 3 weeks later, during a snowstorm that left them stranded together in Daisy's cottage. They were sitting by the fireplace, sharing a bottle of wine, and discussing Melanie's latest research findings when Melanie suddenly went quiet. What is it? Daisy asked. I need to tell you something, Melanie said, setting down her wine glass. I've always dated men. I've never felt this way about a woman before. Daisy's heart raced. What way? Like, I want to know every thought in your head, every story from your past. Like, I want to protect you from people like your ex-husband who don't see how extraordinary you are. Like, I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep listening to you breathe. The confession hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Daisy reached out, cupped Melanie's face in her hands, and kissed her softly. At first, then with growing passion as months of suppressed feelings finally found their voice. "I've been in love with you since that first night at the rest stop," Daisy whispered against Melanie's lips. "I just didn't think someone like you could ever feel the same way about someone like me. Someone brilliant and compassionate and brave. Enough to follow her calling, despite everyone telling her she's wrong." Melanie pulled back to look into Daisy's eyes. "Someone who sees magic in the world and isn't afraid to share it with others. Daisy, you're everything I didn't know I was looking for." Asterisk, their newfound love faced immediate challenges. Thomas escalated his campaign against Daisy's business, filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau and posting negative reviews online claiming she was a fraud. At the university, Melanie faced increasing pressure from colleagues who questioned her research methods and objectivity. "They're saying I've gone native," Melanie told Daisy after a particularly difficult faculty meeting. "That I've lost my scientific objectivity because I'm emotionally involved with my research subject." "Maybe we need to step back," Daisy said, though the words felt like stones in her throat. "I won't let my problems destroy your career." "No," Melanie said firmly. "I won't let fear dictate our choices. Yes, this is complicated, and yes, people are going to judge us. But what we have, both professionally and personally, is worth fighting for." Together, they developed a strategy. Melanie brought in other researchers to validate her findings, ensuring that her personal relationship with Daisy didn't compromise the integrity of her work. They documented everything meticulously, building a case that alternative healing methods deserved serious scientific study rather than dismissal. Daisy, meanwhile, began working with other healers in the area, creating a support network that could withstand Thomas's attacks. She started teaching workshops on crystal healing, sharing her knowledge with others who were called to this work. Asterisk, the breakthrough came in spring, 6 months after their first kiss. Melanie's research had been accepted for publication in a respected journal, and she'd been invited to present her findings at a national conference on integrative medicine. "I want you there with me," she told Daisy as they walked through the newly green fields behind the cottage. "Not as a research subject, but as my partner in this work." "Your partner?" Melanie stopped walking and turned to face her. "In every sense of the word, if you'll have me." The proposal wasn't dramatic, no ring, no bended knee, just two women standing in a field of wildflowers, acknowledging the truth of what they'd built together. But it was perfect in its simplicity and its recognition that love, like healing, doesn't always follow conventional forms. "Yes," Daisy whispered and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like new beginnings. Asterisk, at the conference, Melanie presented her research on the measurable effects of intention-based healing practices to a room full of skeptical medical professionals. She spoke clearly and confidently about her methodology, her findings, and the implications for integrative treatment approaches. "The placebo effect has long been dismissed as somehow less real than other forms of healing," she concluded. "But what if we've been thinking about it wrong? What if belief, intention, and human connection are themselves powerful healing modalities that we should be studying and utilizing rather than dismissing?" During the Q&A session, a particularly hostile doctor challenged her work. "Dr. Powell, isn't it true that you've become romantically involved with your primary research subject? How can we trust research that's clearly been compromised by personal bias?" The room went quiet. Daisy, sitting in the back, held her breath. Melanie stood silent for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, I've fallen in love with Daisy Lewis. I've fallen in love with her brilliance, her compassion, and her courage to pursue healing work, despite constant criticism from people who refuse to consider that they might be wrong. But my personal feelings don't change the data, which has been verified by independent researchers. If anything, my relationship with Daisy has made me a better scientist by teaching me that true objectivity sometimes means being open to possibilities that challenge our preconceptions." The applause that followed was tentative at first, then grew stronger as other conference attendees recognized the courage it took to speak so honestly about the intersection of professional and personal truth. Asterisk. But before we reach the circle's completion, dear ones, Let me tell you about the gifts that came wrapped in unexpected packages during those transformative months. It was late summer when Daisy received a call that would change everything once more. Her estranged sister, Claire, whom she hadn't spoken to in 5 years, was on the other end of the line, her voice shaking with emotion. Daisy, I know we haven't talked, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me after everything that happened with Mom's funeral, but need your help. My daughter, Emma, she has been having these panic attacks ever since her father and I divorced. The doctors want to put her on medication, but she's only 12, and I. Claire's voice broke. I remembered what you used to do for us when we were kids with Grandma's stones. I know I called it nonsense back then, but I'm desperate. Daisy closed her eyes, feeling the old wounds from her family's rejection of her calling. After their grandmother's death, Claire had been the most vocal critic of Daisy's crystal obsession, claiming it was disrespectful to their grandmother's memory to commercialize her teachings. Claire, Daisy said gently, where are you? We're in Portland. Emma's been staying with me since the divorce was finalized. She hasn't slept through the night in months, and yesterday she had such a severe attack that I thought we'd have to go to the emergency room. Melanie looked up from her laptop, sensing the gravity of the conversation. Daisy met her eyes and saw not judgment, but compassion. We'll be there tomorrow, Daisy said without hesitation. We? Claire asked, my partner, Melanie. She's a researcher who studies healing methods. If you're open to it, she might be able to help us understand what Emma's experiencing from a different perspective. The drive to Portland was quiet, both women lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Melanie spoke. Are you nervous about seeing your sister again? Terrified, Daisy admitted. Claire was always the one who understood me best when we were children. When she turned against my work after Grandma died, it felt like losing a piece of my soul. Maybe this is a chance to heal that too, Melanie said softly. Emma was a small 12-year-old with Daisy's same dark hair and their grandmother's knowing eyes. She sat curled in the corner of Claire's living room couch, barely looking up when they arrived. Hi, Emma, Daisy said, settling into a chair across from her. Your mom tells me you've been having a tough time lately? The girl nodded slightly, still not making eye contact. I had panic attacks when I was your age too, Daisy continued. Right after your great-grandmother died, they felt like the world was ending, like I couldn't breathe or think or do anything except be afraid. This time, Emma looked up. Really? Really? And your great-grandmother taught me something that helped. Would you like me to show you? Over the next hour, Daisy worked with Emma the same way her grandmother had worked with her decades earlier. She taught the girl how to hold smooth stones while focusing on her breathing, how to visualize roots growing from her feet into the earth, how to create a sense of safety and grounding when the world felt chaotic. Melanie watched from the doorway, taking notes not as a researcher, but as someone witnessing the profound connection between healing traditions passed down through generations of women. She saw how Emma's breathing slowed, how her shoulders relaxed, how color returned to her pale cheeks, but the real magic happened when Claire joined them. I remember this, Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter work with the stones. I remember Grandma doing this with us during the thunderstorms. How could I have forgotten something so beautiful? Grief makes us forget sometimes, Daisy said gently. We lose one thing, and we think we have to lose everything, connected to it to protect ourselves from the pain. That evening, after Emma had fallen into her first peaceful sleep in months, the two sisters sat on Claire's back porch, finally talking through years of misunderstanding and hurt. I blamed you, Claire said quietly. When Grandma died, I was so angry at the universe, at God, at everyone. And you kept talking about her teachings and healing and finding meaning in it all. And I thought you weren't grieving properly. I thought you were using her memory to make yourself feel special. I was grieving, Daisy replied. I was just doing it in the only way I knew how, by keeping her wisdom alive. I see that now. Watching you with Emma today, seeing how naturally this comes to you. You're not playing at being a healer, Daisy. You are one, just like Grandma was. Melanie stepped onto the porch with 3 cups of tea. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to tell you both something. What I witnessed today, the way trauma can be held in the body, the way human connection and ritual can help release it, this is what my research is trying to understand. You're not just healing individual people, Daisy. You're preserving and practicing a form of medicine that Western culture has forgotten. Claire looked at Melanie with new interest. You really believe in this, as a scientist? I believe in what works, Melanie said simply. And I believe that dismissing traditional healing practices, just because we don't understand their mechanisms, is a form of cultural arrogance that costs us dearly. Asterisk Emma's healing became the catalyst for something neither Daisy nor Melanie had anticipated. Word spread through Claire's community about the alternative methods that had helped a young girl overcome debilitating anxiety without medication. Soon, Daisy was receiving calls from other parents, other families dealing with trauma and stress, and the inadequacies of conventional treatment alone. I think we need to expand, Melanie said one evening as they reviewed requests for help that had come in just that week. Not your practice, our understanding. What if we could create a bridge between traditional healing and modern medicine? What do you mean? I mean, what if we could train medical professionals to incorporate these techniques? What if we could create a certification program that gives healers like you the credibility you deserve while ensuring people receive safe, effective care? The idea was ambitious, perhaps impossible, but as autumn deepened into winter, they began to explore the possibility. Melanie used her academic connections to organize workshops where traditional healers could share their knowledge with medical professionals. Daisy began documenting her techniques, creating teaching materials that honored both the spiritual aspects of her work and the practical applications that could be measured and studied. The resistance was immediate and fierce. Thomas escalated his attacks, now claiming that Daisy was infiltrating the medical establishment with dangerous pseudoscience. Some of Melanie's colleagues accused her of abandoning rigorous scientific standards. There were days when both women wondered if they were fighting a battle they could never win, but then the letters began to arrive. Dr. Powell and Miss Lewis, wrote a nurse from Chicago, I attended your workshop last month and began incorporating breathing techniques and gentle touch into my work with post-surgical patients. Our pain medication usage has decreased by 30%, and patient satisfaction scores have never been higher. Thank you for showing us that healing is about more than just fixing what's broken. An oncologist from Denver wrote, I was skeptical when my hospital administrator asked me to attend your presentation, but after watching how these techniques helped my patients manage treatment anxiety and side effects, I've become a believer. We need more bridges between the worlds of science and spirit. A pediatric psychologist shared, the children I work with respond so much better to trauma therapy when we incorporate the grounding techniques you taught us. One little boy told me, the rocks help me remember I'm safe. How can we argue with results like that? Asterisk by spring, what had begun as Melanie's individual research project had evolved into something much larger. The International Journal of Integrative Medicine published their collaborative paper on traditional healing practices as complementary therapeutic interventions, and they were invited to present their findings at medical conferences across the country. But perhaps more importantly, they were invited to speak at a gathering of indigenous healers who wanted to understand how their traditional practices were being studied and integrated into modern healthcare. We are honored, said Maria Sandoval, an elderly curandera from New Mexico, after Daisy and Melanie finished their presentation to the gathering. But we also want to know, how do we ensure that our knowledge is respected and not just taken? It was a question that kept both women awake at night. How could they bridge worlds without allowing one to colonize the other? How could they honor traditional knowledge while making healing accessible to people who might never have encountered it otherwise? I think, Daisy said slowly, we have to always remember where this wisdom came from. We have to make sure that traditional healers are partners, not subjects. We have to give credit where it's due and share resources equitably. And we have to train people not just in techniques, but in respect, Melanie added. Anyone who wants to incorporate these practices into their work needs to understand that they're touching something sacred. Asterisk, through all of this professional growth and recognition, Daisy and Melanie were also navigating the personal terrain of their deepening relationship. Living together, working together, building something together, it required a level of vulnerability and trust that neither had experienced before. There were moments of friction. Melanie's methodical, analytical approach sometimes clashed with Daisy's intuitive, flow-based way of working. Daisy's emotional processing could overwhelm Melanie, who was still learning that not everything needed to be solved or understood. Intellectually, I love your passion, Melanie said one evening after a particularly heated discussion about their research methodology. But sometimes I need you to slow down and help me understand what you're feeling instead of just expressing it. And I love your brilliant mind, Daisy replied. But sometimes I need you to trust that not everything can be analyzed. Sometimes we just have to feel our way forward. They learned to navigate these differences with the same care and intention they brought to their healing work. They developed rituals for conflict resolution, lighting candles and speaking from the heart rather than from hurt. They created sacred space for their relationship, just as they did for their clients and research subjects. And slowly, they began to understand that their differences weren't obstacles to overcome, but complementary strengths that made them more effective together than either could be alone. The real test of their partnership came in late summer, when Melanie received an offer that could change everything. Harvard Medical School wanted to hire her to head up a new department of integrative medicine research with a substantial budget and the prestige that could legitimize their work on a national scale. It's everything we've been working toward, Melanie told Daisy as they walked along their favorite trail behind the cottage. The kind of platform that could really change how mainstream medicine views traditional healing. But Daisy sensed there was more. But they want me to focus on the research aspects exclusively. They're not interested in the practitioner partnerships we've developed. They want clean, controlled studies that can be published in major journals, not community-based participatory research that honors traditional knowledge holders. Daisy felt her heart sink. The Harvard position would mean not just a geographical separation, though that would be painful enough, but a philosophical one that could undermine everything they'd built together. You have to take it, Daisy said quietly, though the words felt like swallowing glass. This is your chance to really make a difference on a scale we could never achieve from here. Not without you, Melanie said firmly. What we've built isn't just professional, Daisy. It's personal, it's spiritual. It's the foundation of who I've become as a scientist and as a person. I won't sacrifice that for any job, no matter how prestigious. But if you turn this down, will you regret it? Will you always wonder what might have been? They spent weeks wrestling with the decision, talking late into the night about dreams and compromises, about the difference between success and fulfillment, about what it means to stay true to your values in a world that often rewards their abandonment. Finally, Melanie made her choice. She called Harvard and declined the position, but she also made a counterproposal. What if, she suggested to the department head, instead of bringing me to Harvard, we create a collaborative research initiative? My team here has developed relationships with traditional healers across the country. We have data, we have community, trust, and we have results. Partner with us, support our work financially, and we'll provide you with research that's both rigorous and respectful. The response was swift and dismissive. Harvard wasn't interested in provincial research partnerships or accommodating unscientific elements in their program. I'm sorry it didn't work out, Daisy said that evening, holding Melanie close. I'm not, Melanie replied. I realized something when they gave me their final answer. I don't want to be the kind of scientist who has to choose between rigor and respect, between advancement and integrity. I want to be the kind who proves those are false choices. Asterisk 1 year later, Daisy and Melanie returned to the rest stop where they'd first met. It was the same October evening, with the same full moon painting the parking lot silver, but everything else had changed. Melanie's research had opened doors to legitimate study of alternative healing methods at universities across the country. Daisy's practice had grown beyond her wildest dreams, with people traveling from hundreds of miles away to experience her unique combination of traditional crystal healing and evidence-based therapeutic techniques. Their collaborative certification program for integrative healing practitioners had trained over 200 healthcare workers in the past year. Emma, now 13, had become one of their youngest advocates, speaking at conferences about how traditional healing methods had given her tools to manage anxiety that conventional medicine alone couldn't provide. Claire had moved closer, opening a small retreat center where families could learn holistic approaches to healing trauma and stress. The sisters' relationship had healed into something stronger and more honest than it had ever been in their youth. But more importantly, they had found in each other a love that honored both faith and reason, mystery and understanding, the seen and the unseen. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped here that night? Melanie asked, pulling Daisy close as they sat at the same picnic table where they'd shared their first conversation. I think the universe would have found another way to bring us together, Daisy replied, touching the new rose quartz pendant that hung around her neck, a gift from Melanie to replace the one that had shattered the night they met. Some things are meant to be, even if we can't explain exactly how or why. Melanie laughed, the sound bright as crystal singing in the moonlight. A year ago, I would have called that unscientific thinking. And now? Now I know that, Lovelake. Healing, like hope, doesn't always follow the rules we think govern the world. Sometimes the most important truths can't be measured or quantified. Sometimes you just have to trust what you feel in your heart. As they drove home together, their hands intertwined across the center console, Daisy thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A marriage had ended, a crystal had shattered, and from those broken pieces, something beautiful and whole had emerged. Not just their love, but a new understanding of what healing could look like when ancient wisdom and modern science learned to dance together. Not just their partnership, but a community of practitioners and researchers and families who had found hope in the marriage of skepticism and faith. Behind them, the rest stop faded into darkness, but ahead, their shared future stretched endlessly. Bright, full of possibilities they were only beginning to imagine.